This webinar titled Streamlining Your Oracle Applications Database Through Archiving. Today's presenters are Mark Hebert, COO, S28, and Linda Hunt, Program Director with the IBM Product Management and Strategy team. Mark joined S28 in December 2008 as its first Chief Operating Officer. From 2006 to 2008, he was the first Chief Marketing Officer for Virtusa Corporation, a publicly traded IT services firm. Linda is a Program Director with the IBM Product Management and Strategy team. In this role, she is responsible for strategy and roadmap for solutions on top of the InfoSphere information governance platform, including Optum for Oracle packaged applications and SAP. We will be emailing a link to the recorded webinar to all that registered, and we'll also be putting the recorded webinar up on S28's website within the next couple of days. Thank you, Mark and Linda, for presenting, and I'll turn the webinar over to you now.
Thanks, Michael. Good morning from Silicon Valley. I am fresh off the plane from Oracle Collaborate. I arrived there on Sunday afternoon, and it was about 65 degrees in Denver, and when I left this morning, there was 4 inches of snow on the ground, and it was 10 degrees. So I'm very happy to be back in Silicon Valley. So thanks for joining us this morning. We have a crisp webinar, about 30 minutes or so. We wanted to talk about a very timely topic, the topic of Oracle-based applications and specifically the growth of data in those applications and the problems and challenges associated with those. And secondly, the convergence of another major trend along with that we're calling information lifecycle governance. And Linda will talk about IBM's perspective of the big picture on where that trend is moving to and how it converges very nicely with the Oracle Applications Challenge. And then thirdly, we'll talk a little bit about solutions to that situation around archiving solutions with S28 and IBM. Okay, let me kind of paint the historical picture on this a little bit. In many ways, Oracle is the granddaddy of databases. It was really the first relational database to go to market, has been the most successful. The first set of applications that came out on the Oracle database was originally called Oracle Applications, Oracle Financials, and other modules. I joined Oracle in 1988, just when Oracle Financials was coming to market, and I lived through that whole era in the early days. In fact, I was the first CIO for Oracle in around 1990. My job was to make the Oracle business run on Oracle Financials, and we had to be running in production before we would ship the next release of the product. So I lived through a lot of battle scars during those days. That's relevant because I think that the introduction of relational databases and applications on them, initially Oracle eBusiness Suite, but followed later by the other applications that Oracle now owns, Siebel, PeopleSoft, J.D. Edwards, and some of the vertical applications. That, I think, historically marks the beginning of kind of the explosion of data in IT, simply because of the way relational databases make it very easy to get data in. And so everybody who runs Oracle databases, whether they're packaged or custom, finds themselves with an explosion of data that typically is in the 50% per year range, sometimes higher, sometimes a bit lower. But we're all dealing with the problem of the accumulation of that data because it's simply so easy to use relational databases for transactions, and the data becomes more valuable over time for BI purposes. And so as a result, here we are now 24 years or so after the initial introduction of Oracle applications. We went through this huge explosion of uptake in applications around Y2K. We're now 13 years after Y2K. And what we're finding is we have many customers, just as we saw at Collaborate, that have been running these applications for easily 10 or 15 years. Most of them today have never really pulled that data out of production, so they've been accumulating data for a long period of time. Most of the data that's accessed in those databases is only in the last recent recent data. So easily 80% plus of that data is not being accessed. And the effect of that, all that data sitting in production, is it sort of acts like cholesterol, slowing down system performance, making it more expensive to manage those applications in terms of hardware that you need to throw at it to keep performance up, but also the DBA resources needed to manage those applications. Not only the production version, but the multiple copies of production that are used for development, tests, training, QA, and so on. Because the standard way of doing that is to clone production. And so it's not uncommon for Oracle applications customers to have multi-terabytes of data. We've seen some in excess of 5 to 10 terabytes. I'd say the average Oracle eBusiness Suite customer today is a couple of terabytes. And so this data cholesterol effect is really growing in the industry, and it's creating a general problem, this cholesterol problem. On top of that, Oracle itself isn't particularly concerned about this issue. And having come from Oracle in the early days of Oracle applications and databases, I can tell you that Oracle has always been interested in getting the data in, but not so particularly interested in how to get the data out because it cannibalizes the database, and it isn't the highest priority for the application teams. There are some purge routines that come with some of the modules and some of the different products, but in our experience, customers don't tend to like those very much because they're not very functional and they perform poorly. And so we find ourselves with this very interesting problem of having a lot of data that isn't really being used, and here's an opportunity to do something about it. The last point on this first slide is that not only are the packaged applications exhibiting this tendency, but there's an awful lot of custom applications built on Oracle databases that behave in exactly the same way and have exactly the same problems. In addition to that, Oracle applications customers are constantly doing new projects with their applications, not the least of which are upgrades. And in many cases, because of merger and acquisition activity, applications are being retired as they're replaced by new versions of Oracle. So both of those scenarios also create complexities associated with the excess data in the databases. With respect to upgrades, the process of testing and vetting upgrades themselves is, as many of you probably know, is time-consuming. And the more data you have as you test your upgrades, the longer the test cycles take. And it's not atypical to run 3 or more test cycles during an upgrade, a major upgrade. And the longer that takes, the longer the whole upgrade project takes. In addition to that, the upgrade itself can take an awful long time to run. That's not always compatible with available batch windows to get the upgrades done. It's typically done over a weekend, and if you can't run your upgrade within a weekend window, you're in tough shape. And then lastly, there's a lot of bad data as well in terms of the data in these databases. And the more data there is, the harder it is to clean it up. And lastly, the retirement opportunity is particularly interesting from an economic perspective because traditionally when you retire applications or when you replace them, you keep those applications around for some period of time, often a lot longer than you really need to, simply because there's no other simple way to retire that data gracefully along with the hardware and software that it runs on. And as a result, you end up spending a lot more money keeping those applications around than you might need to. And so there's a big opportunity around retirement today. Okay, so that is kind of the database challenge that we're finding with Oracle-based applications. And I wanted to now take the top-down approach and talk a little bit about an emerging trend around information lifecycle governance. And I'm going to turn that over to Linda and let her talk about that.
Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Yes, thank you. So what we just heard from Mark is, those key drivers we hear. Reduce costs, minimize not just the hardware, but operating software costs, as well as costs associated with the staff to maintain the systems. Address the sluggish performance in applications, accelerate time to market of new Oracle application releases, and also comply. Address the needs for risk and compliance, whereby organizations need to comply with their retention policies. ensuring that business users have effective access to data residing both in production and archive. So that's the data management challenge. Furthermore, in the area of compliance, if we can turn to the next slide, please. An emerging trend is the convergence of archiving and information lifecycle governance practices. Now, I came from the FileNet, and I ran a product management team focused on records management. And what we're seeing as an emerging trend is organizations not only need to have a defensible solution to obtain and preserve and eventually dispose enterprise records across not just your files and documents, but also across your structured data. Database archiving can be leveraged here when it comes to legal hold or defensible disposable for structured information. There's that merging of that and support of IT budgets and governance policies. And because there is support for the business object, that is fundamentally key here. If you're ever asked to provide proof of your business activity, for example, if you receive an audit request or a request to legally hold for a particular customer, for example, your archive needs to represent all the related information for that business activity. And furthermore, you need to have that granular access for that business activity. So let's say you got the fundamentals of information lifecycle governance is to have something that's defensible, but also that you dispose what you don't need anymore. The retention, if the retention policies in your organization say that you no longer need this particular set of information past 7 years, you need to dispose that. But let's say you get a legal hold request for a particular customer. You need to be able to hold that, but then dispose the rest. And those are some key features and functionalities that we're seeing that can be leveraged from database archiving technologies and information lifecycle governance. So InfoSphere Optum provides those solutions to address the needs to reduce costs, accelerate performance, and meet organization compliance policies, as well as address the needs in this emerging area of lifecycle management trends across the enterprise, across both their structured and unstructured information. Okay, back to you, Mark.
Okay, thanks, Linda. So from our standpoint in our enterprise data management practice, we're seeing medium-sized and large Oracle customers now start to take a top-down approach to managing data through to the end of its life cycle. So this concept of information lifecycle governance is actually becoming much more formalized in many large companies. The position of a governance VP is starting to come up in some customers. And we're starting to see the development of a new corporate asset as a result of that I call the corporate archive repository. It's basically the place where data goes at the end of its life and is managed through to completion until it's finally no longer needed and purged. And so this corporate asset now, represents a completely different way of thinking about all of this data that's been being accumulated in relational databases like Oracle over the last 10 or 20 years. And the key to building that repository is an archiving strategy and a platform for doing that. So S28 has been in this business now for 5 years, the business of creating corporate archive repositories. We believe we're the world's leading specialist in that. We've done about 150 projects, most of which use IBM Optum, and I would say about half of which are on Oracle databases, either the applications packages or custom applications on Oracle. The Optum platform that we use is by far the leading platform. It has 76% market share according to Gartner's last report, which we'll send out to the attendees. So it's a dominant platform, and I think the reason it is so dominant is that it's really the only fully developed platform that is usable not only for Oracle databases, but virtually any other as well. And I'll show you a slide in a minute that characterizes that. Using a platform like this, you can develop an archiving strategy that can start with an individual application like Oracle eBusiness Suite or Siebel or PeopleSoft or JD Edwards, but then can be used to kind of standardize as a platform for the whole enterprise to take advantage of the benefits associated with archiving applications in general. By having an archiving strategy like this, then the effect of it is to move unused data, which in many cases is 80% or more of what's being stored in production, to create a leaner, more agile production database that then lubricates all of the rest of your business. It assures the SLAs for system performance on those production databases and makes the whole process of managing IT assets, hardware, and labor much more efficient. And then the last point I would add is that while many customers have been doing this on an on-premise basis, it's very easy now to configure a solution like Optum in a managed hosting service, and we offer that as an option as well for our customers. I want to just spend 1 minute on the product family itself so that you have a sense of what the components are and what we're really talking about. So Optum itself is a family of 5 products configured here, but with these 5 green boxes. 2 of them apply to production databases. Those are the 2 on the lower right. And so the archiving solution is called Data Growth, the bottom right one. Its sister product is decommissioning, or it's used for retiring applications based on the same engine. 2 of the products are for non-production databases. That's called Test Data Management and Data Privacy. The idea behind those is to streamline the creation and management of non-production copies of production data by subsetting data so that you create much leaner, more agile versions of production data for development, test, training purposes, and the ability to mask that data so that it preserves the security of the data for users who are not really authorized to see production data. Those 2 products are very popular as well, as you can imagine, because of compliance needs, and both regulatory and business compliance that are becoming more important in a whole range of industries today. The last product at the top is called Discovery, and it is a product that introspects databases for the purpose of identifying the data model in cases where it's not obvious what the data model is, either because they're old applications, they're not documented, or they're highly complex, and perhaps the data relationships are embedded in the code as opposed to expressed in the data model itself. And so we use that for custom applications by and large to make sure that we understand the full data model, because you need to archive based on a whole business object. So the basic fundamental architecture of Optum relies on 4 specific components, 4 pillars. They represent really the competitive advantages of a platform like Optum. One is the enterprise nature of the platform. I'll talk about that more in 1 minute with a separate slide. I alluded to the second pillar just a moment ago. So when you're archiving, you really want to make sure that all of the data relationships are expressed specifically, and that the data you pull out has full context, not only the transactions, but the master records associated with them and the reference tables and data that makes them fully meaningful. And so we define whole business objects. With Optum, you get some of those out of the box with the leading packages, or you can build them yourself for custom applications. But you always want to be able to archive as a whole object so that you can then access that object without having to federate data in other locations. The third principle is the idea of not only extracting data, but populating a corporate archive repository that I've been alluding to, and having the ability to not only do that in an immutable format, but also be able to take some of that data back into production if you need to restore it, or to populate other databases for purposes of reporting, perhaps, or litigation hold. Sometimes it's important to take specific data out of an archive because you need to use it again. Legal hold is a good example. And then lastly, the fourth pillar is that once that data is in a corporate archive repository, you should be able to access it from virtually any of your favorite reporting tools, query or reporting, so that you can have a standard way of accessing that data. In the case of some of the Oracle packages, that might include the native forms and reports of those packages, or Oracle Discoverer and other tools like that that are popularly used in the Oracle community. The enterprise architecture slide nature I wanted to emphasize a little bit more so you can understand better what Optum covers. So the idea here is that if you have a full enterprise platform, it ought to be able to access data and manage data on virtually any storage mechanism and device, on virtually any operating system, distributed or legacy mainframe or legacy mini computer, with virtually any file structures, relational or non-relational, and with a full range of, a full platform that does all of the things that we've been talking about this morning: archiving, retirement, subsetting, and masking. And with Optum, you get some of that functionality for the leading packages out of the box, off the shelf. So all of the leading Oracle-based packages, Oracle EBS, Siebel, PeopleSoft, J.D. Edwards, and also a number of others that come out of the box from IBM or IBM's partners, which is the green boxes on the right. And that's the full platform. And so what we're able to do with Optum is maybe start with one specific application, but then migrate the whole strategy to a full corporate standard that handles almost any application on any platform. And this is particularly useful in companies that are executing an ILM strategy with a factory model. So we're seeing many of our larger customers implement archiving and retirement factories. We've been doing this at T-Mobile, for example, and Merck, and a few others. And they, because of the virtue of lots of mergers and acquisitions that they've done over the years, they've got all kinds of obsolete applications and older applications that are ready to be retired or archived. And we can use Optum to do that in a standard way, creating a standard corporate archive repository with the data from any of those applications archived in a standard format and accessed with standard reporting tools. And so that's the nature of the solution associated with the problem of archiving Oracle-based applications. To summarize, there is now a way to go after the data cholesterol in your production applications in a standard way, to create a leaner, meaner production database, to ensure SLAs for performance, to reduce costs, storage cost and CPU cost, to improve the efficiency of your DBAs, and to create the overall leaner and meaner organization that you need to manage and enhance your applications over time. At the same time, with this corporate archive repository, you have a place where all that data goes. It's readily accessible. It can be used then as a central place to manage your data retention policy, including moving data out and purging it when it's time as part of that policy. And that's a very much more streamlined approach than the traditional way of retiring applications to tape. And at the same time, you also have a common platform not only for archiving and retiring, but also for the non-production uses of data through subsetting and masking. And that's the end of our prepared comments. I'm going to stop there and turn it back over to Michael to open it up for questions.
Great. Thank you, Mark and Linda, for presenting. We'll open it up for questions for the attendees. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the questions area of GoToWebinar or the chat window as well. Either one will work. Excuse me. Here's our first question. What size database is worth archiving?
In our experience, the economics of archiving start often in the 500 gigabyte or so range and above. Some customers will archive smaller databases because of specific performance concerns. So we've seen projects with databases as low as 200 gig. But I'd say the sweet spot starts at half a gig and on up. And as I mentioned, that most Oracle applications customers are well over a gig these days, and so well over a terabyte these days, and so so many of them are candidates for this strategy.
Great, thank you, Mark. Here's our next question. Why use a third-party product when Microsoft offers native archiving solutions for some of them?
Actually, you mean Oracle offers some. So I alluded to that point earlier. Oracle does offer some purge routines in some of the applications, some basic archiving capabilities in others, but it's not a comprehensive platform. And even for, say, Oracle E-Business Suite, not all the modules have purge routines. And the purge routines themselves don't really lend to a good archiving strategy for this concept of a corporate archive repository and managing that data through to the end of its life. So it's kind of an ad hoc approach. Some customers do use it. Some try it and don't like it and stop using it, and then go to an archiving strategy with a platform-based approach.
Great, thank you, Mark. Next question: how do you handle archive data that becomes part of a legal process and must be held indefinitely?
Linda, do you want to try to take that one?
Sure. So, because of Optum's support of the business object, there's an ability to look into the archive and get exactly what business activity needs to be put on hold, and extract that. And then, based on the retention policies for the rest of the archive, for example, for the rest of the information, we can then determine what needs to be held for the time that is when you are in litigation, and compare that with the retention of the rest of the information. And if that rest of the information can be disposed of, they can separate the two, dispose the rest, but keep only that information that is still under litigation. So that is the concept behind the integration across the records management information lifecycle solution with Optum solutions.
And so what we've seen is that customers who do get into litigation type data management, they will create a separate litigation database. They'll pull data out of production and out of the archives using Optum and this restore capability, and have all of that litigation-based transaction data separately managed in its own little repository. And in fact, for large litigation type use cases, there are actually products that are used to manage that data once it's in the database. There's actually a product by IBM called Atlas that Optum integrates with that is used for that very purpose. And so the whole area of litigation support and management has become its own separate space these days.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mark and Linda. Looks like there are no more questions. Thank you to the attendees for attending today's webinar. We've recorded it, and we're going to put it up on S2A's website. You should receive it, or you should see it there in a couple of days. We're also going to send it out to all that registered. So you should be receiving an email with a link to the webinar recording. And Mark's information is right there on the screen. Should you have any questions, feel free to email him or give him a call with any question that you might have. Thank you, Mark and Linda, for presenting today. And Mark, I'll leave the last word with you.
Thanks, everybody. I just wanted to say that I was really encouraged with the attendance at Collaborate this year. It was well over 5,000 attendees. I used to be on the board of the OAUG, and it's really nice to see that it's still very vibrant and the attendance is up over recent years. So I think, generally speaking, the Oracle applications economy is alive and kicking and quite healthy. So thank you, everybody.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Bye-bye.